For the holiday season, I am visiting family. I live in a neighborhood where there are a lot of elderly people. Today, an elderly gentleman came by, and he brought a little Christmas package of pretzels with chocolate coated on them. And he had a scar on the side of his face, a very large band-aid. This guy was probably in his late 70s. Had a really pure and beautiful energy. And I'm a little self-conscious in this neighborhood because when I go out for a jog, I'm a pretty hairy dude. Have longer hair and some facial hair. I'm 6 foot tall. And I'm afraid that I'm going to strike fear in the hearts of the elderly. But this guy seemed to be pretty cool. I mean, he came by and offered us some Christmas treats. And I was making sure that I embraced him with a warmth and a subtle ecstasy to put him at ease. And I went into the other room to tell my mother, but she was in the shower, so I just took the Christmas treats and I put them on the counter. Now, later, I went for a jog in the same neighborhood, and I was looking at the houses, and I've noticed that it's pretty barren. I know that all these houses have people in them, but there's no life in the neighborhood, which is strange because I think I've become accustomed to that. So even the cars are supposed to be parked in the garages. You can't have cars on the driveways. And it made me reflect on my recent trip to Los Angeles, to Hollywood, and for 4th of July there was a neighborhood party. And people from all these different houses could come out and have hot dogs and beer and Coke and burgers and all that stuff with strangers. It's utterly fascinating to me that this exquisite energy of people commingling on a sidewalk randomly has become such a abnormal thing. I mean, abnormal in the sense that when we experience it, it's so refreshing and takes care of a certain need for wholeness that we didn't understand as absent until we actually found its answer. So there's a certain starvation that occurs when we live in neighborhoods where you can't even have a car parked on your driveway, much less people milling about and fraternizing with each other in an amicable way and enjoying one another's company in this most nonchalant, carefree, engaging space of the heart. It's not even there. And I've spent a good bit of time in New York City. And of course, human beings do interact, but it's very much like if you were to imagine like 1 trillion protons in a aquarium, and they're all bouncing around, and there's a certain degree of intimacy because they're all intersecting and bumping and skidding off of each other and ricocheting. But of course, it's all very manic, and it's not conducive to deep intimacy. And I often personally reflect on the absence of radical intimacy. In one of my books, I actually call it atomocentric intimacy. It's intimacy that goes down to the atom. And it's a exceptionally foreign concept, I think. Exceptionally foreign practice. To be intimate. And I'm not speaking about just romantic intimacy. I'm talking about intimacy with everyone. And you'll hear me often just railing against the mainstream news media. Because what happens is we plug into that, and all of a sudden we just like hate everybody. It's like anti-intimacy. Do you know what I mean? It destroys the intrinsic capacity for communion that human beings have with each other. So when I was on my jog, I had this image come to me of cosmic Shiva. And I have a particular image as my desktop. And it's the Cosmic Shiva by a gentleman named Android Jones. Look it up. And you can just go to Google, put in Cosmic Shiva, Android Jones. And I have such a deep resonance with this image. And as I was jogging, I was imagining waking up in the morning and supplicating myself in my imagination to the Cosmic Shiva. I'm not a Hindu. I just resonate with things and I go with it. There's a certain genius that appears and I'm like, I want you. And I had this image of praying to Shiva in the morning to give me the capacity and the courage to walk up to every single house in this suburb of the elderly and being hairy and saying, Happy Holidays or Merry Christmas or Happy Hanukkah or whatever it is. And no matter what their degree of fear, I would simply embrace that intimately and I would let their fear hit my own heart. Maybe they wouldn't be afraid at all, but let's imagine they are afraid. And I think that equation of fear coming from another and then hitting our heart, and then we have a fear of our own fear, that equation is really at the heart of intimacy. So someone's afraid of me. I can feel their fear. And then I have it in my heart. I can immediately, empathically sense their fear. And then I'm afraid, right? I'm afraid of this sensation that's been broadcast to me through their facial image and their energetics, the signature of their body mind as it's transmitted into mine. I feel, And so I want to get away from this fear that's been transmitted into me. And I feel fear about this fear. And all of a sudden there's this no intimacy with that elderly person who I want to give a Christmas treat to for the holiday season. And I want to do this 300 or 400 times in a day, in a week. And I would need Shiva because there would be so much fear. Who is this stranger coming to my door and knocking and giving me these Christmas treats? I look at him through the window right next to the front door and I'm like, oh my God, I'm terrified. Maybe I'll open the door or maybe I won't. Okay, I'll open the door. Oh my God, I'm so afraid. And then this hairy guy, he feels my fear. But he's not going anywhere. He's smiling. He's maintaining eye contact. The fear of intimacy. It's so painful. It's so painful to be intimate. How strange is that? That real communion with our fellow human being would be such a challenge. Why have we become so alienated from one another? Why is intimacy one of the core predicaments of human being? We can practice intimacy every day. Not just with our family, with our beloved, with our friends, but with strangers, and most importantly, with ourselves. Because what is intimacy with the self? Intimacy with the self is feeling all of this and not running. And becoming a lover with respect to one's own interiors. And then you can't help but be a lover with respect to that afraid person in front of you who's broadcasting their fear into your heart. And then you become very intimate with that fear. Intimate. And you don't turn away. You just keep on staring into their eyes with love.